I don't know if you can be born a Christian because you have to be aware that you're a sinner to then realize that you need a savior. Hello, how's it going? Thank you. Hi, my name is Naveen Richard and I am a Christian. I don't usually get to say that when I'm holding a mic in front of a light. Yeah, I'm going to be talking about something I don't usually get to talk about when I'm doing my job, which is supposed to be stand-up comedy. You know, I never get to talk about God. God's been a big, huge, and everything part of my life the last 2 years. So I'm going to tell you about that. And I'll tell you what, and I do mean, the last 2-3 years. Before that, God was in and around as far as I could tell. Because I was a just-in-case Christian, I don't think anyone's familiar with that term because I made it up. Okay, a just-in-case Christian is a Christian who prays just in case there's a God. A just-in-case Christian is a Christian who goes to church. A just-in-case Christian is a Christian who goes to church just in case that's the true God. Has a Bible lying somewhere around the vicinity of his room or house just in case that the God of the Bible is the real God. That's the kind of Christian I was. But the last 2-3 years though, yeah, now I'm a Christian for sure. Signed, sealed, and delivered. I'm a Christian now. Yeah, I'll be honest. Actually, I mean, you know what? I don't get to talk about this in any of my stand-up shows, so I'm glad you guys are. For once, I can talk about this holding a mic. Otherwise, people, if I say God itself, people will be like, oh, now he's preaching to us. Tell jokes and go home. So I'm glad I'm getting to do this. So my dad is from Tamil Nadu and my mom is from Kerala, and I have a younger brother as well. My younger brother is like a car fanatic, he keeps going on these adventures all around the country, driving jeeps and things like that, and that's kind of his job as well. So when I was in 6th standard or 6th or 7th grade itself, I was already like the class clown, trying to make everyone laugh, trying to find my identity in that. And when I was around 9th grade, my dad decided to send me to a boarding school. You know what a boarding school is where they say parents who don't love their children send them, but that's not what happened to me. My parents loved me so much that they were like, it's for your own good that you need to go to a boarding school because you're getting overweight and lazy and you need a little discipline in your life. We're sending you to boarding school. And I don't think I went there crying or anything. It was a pretty beautiful place, It was in this valley in between the hills up in Tamil Nadu, in the hills somewhere. And that's where all my talents kind of started coming out, this talent to sing. There was a choir there, acting because there was theater every year, playing musical instruments. I used to play the trumpet back in school. So all these talents started coming out, all because what are you supposed to do with this stuff? What are you supposed to do with these talents? This is India. I don't think any parents would just generally encourage their kids to say, hey, why don't you get into this entertainment, whatever, you can make faces. Maybe there's a career in this for you. But you don't think this is going to be a practical career. So then I was wondering, what is a practical career? I thought I'd take journalism because I thought I had a knack for writing. But my father said, if you take journalism, you can't be anything but a journalist. Why don't you take law instead? If you take law, be a lawyer, people respect you, and then you can do whatever you want. So I said, okay, I guess so. It sounds more interesting than studying BCom. No offense to BCom graduates. So I said, okay, I'll take up law, and I studied law for 5 years. But this English stand-up comedy thing was just starting off in India. There must have been like maybe 10 or 15 comedians at the time, and I was also entering it at that same time. So those of us who got into this about 12 years ago had a kind of early leg in. And we didn't know what we were getting into except that this was a great way to creatively express something without the confines of, like, you know, when you're doing theater, there's like 7 other actors involved, you got rehearsals and you have to practice the same thing, and you feel like kind of a tool in the hands of a director, and you have to do exactly what they say. But with the stand-up comedy, I was able to write my own script, perform it the way I wanted, and hone my skill, and I had the freedom to go wherever I wanted and travel and things like that. So that felt like this cool little superpower you had. You know, yeah, well, there's law, but I'm not called for it, but I feel like I have another calling, and you didn't feel like you were questioning yourself. At least you had that, you know. Maybe it's because I was not like everybody. I had some insecurity in me, so God gave me this to hold on to till I really found Him. So me and my friends used to make these YouTube videos, hoping that one day somebody will notice us and give us like a movie to make or something like that. But we didn't know that there would be something called Amazon coming in, you know, and brands and all these guys would want to make web series on YouTube. So suddenly we were given these huge opportunities from spending like 1,000 rupees, which is like maybe $50 or something worth. That was our budget for our little videos. And suddenly we were given, you know, tens of thousands, if I'm bad at converting into math, but like huge budgets for huge shows. Now, you know what? All of this is going to sound like, oh, great, God blessed you with this. What a prosperous career you had. But if I'm honest, I don't know. I don't know. Was that really God in the sense that, you know, some of the things that we did in some of these videos and these shows are not the kind of things that I would stand by now. The language that I might have used, the ideas that I might have pushed were not godly, morally or ethically. They weren't something I'd stand by. So I would just say it was my time in Egypt, I guess, trying to understand what the world is like. You know, God allowed it for His greater purposes. And this whole time my parents were, you know, my father was happy for me. My mom was glad, but still she was burdened for my soul, you know. Everybody would come and tell her, look at your son, he's a celebrity and isn't he famous? You must be so proud. And she would be like, but what's the point? He's not saved. Here's something I keep forgetting to mention whenever I share my testimony. I forget to mention the amount of praying my mom did. Classic son, guys not giving any credit to the moms for all the work they do behind the scenes. You know, my mom was praying for so many years. Okay, not only was she praying, she was convincing everyone she met to pray. Anytime someone would be like, oh, Naveen, your son is famous, you must be so proud. Be like, no, but his soul is lost. Please pray for my son. And I remember after I got saved, there'd be so many friends of my mom's, you know, coming in like saying, oh, Naveen, we were praying for you. So glad to see you. Naveen, we were praying for you. Naveen, we were praying for you. I'm like, oh, this is embarrassing. Were you guys watching me this whole time doing all this stupid stuff I was doing before? Thank you. Thank you. So if any praying moms out there watching, keep praying. Any sons and daughters who haven't been saved, you're next. You better watch out. Okay, your mom's praying for you. Better watch out. In a good way. Don't watch out. You know what? Just do what you're doing. Okay? Don't get conscious. You know what? Can you just surrender to Jesus? Save your mom some trouble. Surrender your life to Jesus. All right, let's keep going with the story. My mom would tell me all these Bible stories growing up. You know, those are our bedtime stories, were Bible stories. She would teach us how to pray and things like that. But your heart knows that there's something more, but this information is stopping your heart from, you know, and this inclination to the world, this inclination to sin blocks you from knowing, draws you back, you know, from knowing who God is. Because it says, you know, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord, or the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And me and everyone else I knew, we think we're wise. We're starting off from the wrong point. So we are justifying everything wrong with the world and everything right with the world. We're justifying even miracles. I used to witness like little miracles and coincidences and things like that I knew were supernatural. I would look at supernatural things happening, but I would just never attribute it to the God of the Bible, because I used to think that that's too narrow. And so in many other ways, you end up compromising. You know, all the values that you start off with before you get into this, that you think I'm never going to compromise on, very slowly over time, as slowly as a mountain can like degrade, erode. You don't see soil erosion happening, but suddenly there's no mountain. So suddenly you have this value system, and slowly over time it goes, and then one day you're like, whoa, how did I end up over here? And I didn't have the courage to say I'm going to keep it 100% clean. More than the courage, I just didn't have the strength to say I'm going to keep it 100% clean. But all of that changed when I got saved, though. That courage, the strength came to say, nope, no more compromise. So the lockdown started and there was nothing much to do. I remember my stand-up special, which I was so anxious about. It came out exactly after the lockdown was announced. Like a few days after the lockdown was announced, and that time everybody was at home. They were doing nothing but watching stuff online. So there couldn't have been a better time for my special to release. And I say this even though in my special I had a joke in which I talked about God, and I'm trying to make jokes, and there was a joke I had about things I'm not proud of, me exploring what God was and all of that stuff. And yet it came out in a time when everyone was home, and I couldn't have picked a better time for that special to release. When I remember doing an Instagram live interview, I think I used quite a bit of bad language in that. And I thought nobody noticed, not many people have watched it. A couple of weeks later, my mom had called about something, and then she brought up this interview and she was like, Naveen, why do you keep using bad words? So many of the things are clean, and see kids watching it, so they could end up watching this as well. Why can't you read the Bible like I was telling you to? Because then you'll understand what I'm talking about. I was just a appeaser. I said, yeah, okay, you know what, this is how we talk. I was justifying it, and I said, maybe I'll read the Bible, okay, whatever. And I hung up the call. And then a couple of hours later, my dad called. He didn't know that my mom had called. He just happened to call, and he said, Naveen, your mom is having some kind of a side effect or something from some medication. It's really causing some kind of nerve pain in her head, and it seems very serious. And he says, so can you book some tickets to come back home? But there's no flights and there's no trains. You can't even drive your car down. If there's an emergency, there's nothing you can do. This is that height of the lockdown. We can't step out of your house without police permission, let alone drive across the country or fly across the country. So I was helpless. And so the next day, just out of guilt, I just picked up the Bible and I started reading it. I was not sure where to start. Started with Matthew, started reading the Bible, and a few pages in, there was this conviction about my sin that kind of started, it shook me a little bit. I remember my hands trembling. I'm like, is this true? So I called a friend of mine. He was this Christian guy. He was in another field. He was also kind of a famous guy. And he shared his testimony in a room full of comedians about 2-3 years before that. I thought about him. And I thought, let me ask him what he thinks about all of this. So then he said, yeah, let's get on a call at night. We got on a call that night. And I asked him, what about the sin stuff, man? Are we in trouble? Like, what is the Bible, and this and that. And he just calmed me down. He didn't condemn me. He didn't make me feel guilty. He was very gentle. He's a gentle guy. He told me not to worry. He just told me about his relationship with Jesus, about his friendship with Jesus, how he goes to Jesus for everything, and about his friends who take every decision first asking God. And that moment, I suddenly wanted that Jesus that he was talking about. I was like, I wonder if this is what I've been looking for. Is my search coming to an end? It's like all this searching I was doing, I wonder if it's coming to a culmination point. I wonder if this is, it felt close. I'm not sure yet, but I'm like, can this be it? But I wasn't convinced. I needed something to push me over the edge in a good way. Sounds like it's going to be hard to do. And I was like, God, if you're real, then you have to tell me, because I don't want to take some crazy step. I don't want to be imagining all of this, and then, I don't want people to get hurt. It's the consequences of this. And I was like, well, how's God going to speak to me? How does God talk to people? Is it through the Bible? I keep hearing that God speaks to me through the Bible. And to be honest, I was a little drained, and by now I was kind of tearing up in my eyes from just like being afraid of what's going to happen. I was tearing up, and I was like, well, the Bible's there, but I don't feel like getting up and picking up the Bible. So the phone was next to me. I picked up the phone. I remember I downloaded the app. So I opened this app for the first time in my life as I was crying out to God and asking him to speak to me, to tell me that it's going to be okay. if I follow him. And there was this verse of the day that day from Revelation, which is the book that kind of convinced me the Bible was real. I was crying out to God, and the verse of the day was, He shall wipe away all their tears. From Revelation 21:4. He shall wipe away all their tears. As I was crying and asking God to speak to me, He shall wipe away all their tears. So then I was convinced that this was Him. There wasn't much time to, it was not like I was thinking about it for 5 minutes. When I read that verse, something made me cry even more. Something made me go down on the floor and start like sobbing even harder, because I was so overjoyed that God spoke to me, that this was Him, that my search had come to an end. And I remember the first few days after I got saved, I think I felt invincible. I felt like I had the best lawyer in the world with me. I'm like, we can't lose. We can't lose. And I probably sounded insane to my friends, because I was going up to them and I was saying stuff like, dude, this global warming and all, it doesn't matter, man. Jesus is coming back anyway, so it doesn't. And I'm sure they probably thought I lost my mind and they had no idea what the context was. I wasn't making sense. By God's grace, I could see the fire died down just enough that I could see and start relating to people. Boy, do I miss that fire that was burning high when I felt invincible. I'm always praying for that fire to come back to be as high as it was. God keeps it under control so we can still relate to people, I think. And then I grew in faith, and this is some of the stuff that happened after that. I haven't even heard the gospel yet. What is the gospel? That Jesus died for your sins so that you can be set free from your sins. He will give you a new heart, all these kind of things. Nobody had told me any of this stuff. And I think God knew that I needed it to happen like that, because I'm a guy who overthinks. And if someone told me the gospel and then I went through changes, I would have been like, maybe I'm imagining this. Must be some psychological effect of whatever. No, it all happened when I was on the floor crying. I was overcome with the presence of God. And then I heard His voice. It was like God was asking me, do you finally believe me? Do you finally believe who I am? Because, I had been going around looking for who is God. I said, yeah, I do believe you. I believe you. And He said, will you ever doubt who I am again? And I was crying. It's like, no, I never will, no. And I said, what about this and what about that? And He said, do you trust me? I said, yeah. He said, I'll take care of it. And then I was at peace. After that, I didn't feel like cursing again. I didn't feel like using any bad words. I just felt like I was given a new heart and everything was new again. And I just knew that my spirit or whatever is going to heaven. Yeah, so every time I do something now, I have to check my motive. I can't deceive myself into thinking I'm doing this for God, because if I'm not spending enough time with God, I can start thinking for myself. And I need to spend enough time with God every morning to make sure that that day is spent for Him. Okay, listen, you know what? I have to address this. I know there's some people watching, some young teenager or young adult or maybe a 45-year-old guy watching this because your mom or your dad dragged you into this, right? They must have told you like, oh, look at this young chap. He's praying. Why don't you pray like him? Look at him. Look at him. He's given his life to Jesus. Why don't you give your life to Jesus? Well, look at him. And you know what? I know you guys are probably like, oh man, not again. You're probably like, oh man, this guy sounds like he had an awesome life before this. He gave it all up. He probably is living a boring life now. Furthest thing from the truth. All right. Even if the world is looking at me thinking that I'm making videos or comedy videos, something funny, that has nothing in relation to the gospel. Even today, I'm supposed to put up a video on Instagram. It's nothing to do. It's just a very silly video. So now when I look back, I can look at just the number of things Jesus saved me from. Number one is my sin. Not that I'm sinless now, but when I was teaching this children's Bible study one time, I had to really understand something about free will, And so I was doing some reading up about it. And I realized, we might have free will when we're born, but we're not able to really practice that free will. We have an inclination to freely sin. If this is a kind of like a compass, for some reason it's always drawn towards sin. It's not drawn towards righteousness. It's drawn towards sin. It's drawn towards justifying your sin. But what Jesus did for me in an instant, in that moment, is He gave me a heart that was inclined to righteousness, a heart that desired righteousness, that still would, sometimes fall and unintentionally sin. Earlier it was intentional sin, now it's unintentional sin. Earlier, intentionally, something is bad and you go watch it anyway, or you say it anyway, or you do it anyway. Now, it's like you sin and you're like, man, I shouldn't have done that. As opposed to walking right towards it knowing it's sin. That's a huge change after that. The other thing He saved me from was my ambition. And I know the world says you gotta be ambitious, you gotta take life by the horns and go ahead and conquer and this and that. I did that. I was so ambitious that I was a slave to my own ambition. Now I'm set free from that. I'm not running for myself towards this endless goal. The goal is, in one way, the goal is reached. I'm saved now. My Father is in heaven. My Father is God. I have His approval. Now it's just like I have to run this race the best that I can, knowing that I've already crossed the finish line. In fact, somebody else has crossed the finish line for me. Jesus has crossed the finish line. He's not saying go out there and prove yourself. He's done it. He's passed the exam. He's lived a perfect life. He was sacrificed for my sins. So I never have to worry anymore. I know how my life ends, or it starts again after I die. But then the rest of this life is all about serving Him, and it's about taking instructions from Him. Now I don't have to worry about, should I make a song next? Should I make a movie next? Should I make a podcast next? I can let myself get confused, or I can just spend time with God and let Him direct me. Don't conform to the patterns of the world. The Bible says be renewed by the transforming of your mind. And how do you do that? Well, you spend time with God. He's the source of all creativity. Go to Him, not to become famous, but go to Him and ask Him, just God, who are You? Help me to be more like You. Help me use my talents for Your glory. And then He'll give you new original ideas that the world might imitate from you, but you don't imitate the world. And be careful not to use that to get attention for yourself. As much as you can, give the attention to God. We were not designed for fame. We were not designed to get the accolades of man. We were not designed for that. God was designed to get the glory. It's very dangerous for us to handle that hot material. It's hot material. Someone gives it to us, you'll be like, God, You please take the glory for it, And when we put people up on a stage and we put all the lights and then the action and then we build up the atmosphere with the music, we're just creating this fake glory for this person. And everyone looks at that and says, I want that, but we don't know what happens to the person inside, how it eats up their spirit from the inside, what the end of that person is. And yet that is what we encourage. And that is what I'm trying to run away from. I'm trying, in God's time. And hopefully God uses even that time of me on the stage to give Himself the glory. That is my story. I know that for some who still have difficulty believing, you're probably telling yourself, it seems stupid that a man who died on the cross is the meaning of life. That's the answer to everything, a man who died on the cross. That seems kind of foolish or stupid, and you know what? God is very self-aware how it seems. In the Bible it says, the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. But if you go out and look for the evidence, go ahead and look for all the logical questions you have, find answers to it. There are the answers. All the philosophical questions you have, go out and find the answers. There are answers. All the scientific, biological questions, there are answers. And it'll all lead up to the cross. And then you'll realize that it's pretty stupid not to believe in the cross. So go out and look. All right? Thank you very much.
searching for fulfillment? Discover true happiness. Stay tuned to Shalom World.